This is going to be sort of a pure reminiscence video for, of course, myself, talking about my experience with having played Runescape back in its heyday. I know that doesn't make me unique or anything like that, but I think it's sometimes interesting to hear how games affected people in a certain way. And I would say that RuneScape for me, for a long time, again, I know it's savvy, would have defined me probably as a person because of just how big of a role it played in my life in terms of I would, go to school, come home, and play it with my friends. And it was really, really, really pivotal in terms of just the significance that it had and for how long it had it. So that's what I want to talk about for this video. And to give a little context, I started playing in, and I guess this would just be playing at all, not in any significant capacity. I started playing, it would have had to have been probably in 2002. I think third grade was the first time I ever logged into the game. I didn't know what it was or anything, obviously, because, what would that make you? That would have made me 9. I'm 24 now. And RuneScape's golden age has, long since passed. But if I go and I look up how many people playing the game, 62,000 is nothing to sneeze at. So, it's nothing like the 200,000 there were back in the day, but I want to say after that whole bot nuke thing, the population of players dropped from, maybe, I think it was about 200,000 at any given time were on RS, except for maybe like the dead of night in the US. So there were always a lot of people on. But I want to say after that bot nuke, the player count must have dropped by, and maybe I'm misremembering, but 75%, or just something ludicrous. It seemed that the day before, you have 150, 200,000 people playing the game. That's a lot of people, and then the next morning it's like boom, 20K. And when they first announced that that's what they were going to do, the bot nuke, I think I kind of said to myself that, okay, shitty as it is, this is the beginning of the end for RS2 as it existed then, because it was still RS2 and not RS3, which we won't even talk about because I didn't play it mostly, but 2 because it's just so radically different from S2. But when that bot nuke came along, I just said to myself, this is probably going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back. Because back then, maybe there were like 1 or 2 people doing it, and it was as like a personal challenge. But I don't think the Iron Man community, frankly, even existed at that point. There was no name for it. There was, I just don't, I never, to put it this way, I never remember hearing about anyone, big name RuneScape YouTuber or otherwise, who was playing the game Iron Man style like there exists today, which I think is personally an inferior way to experience the game. It's an MMO. You're supposed to interact with other players and things like that. If it was meant to be a single player game, then it'd be a single player game, but it's not. So when they said that, you know, the bots were going to be flying the way of the dodo bird because they were rolling out some massive back end update that was essentially going to, you know, slide the carpet out from under probably all but the most advanced bots, that's when I said to myself, there's going to be, you're not going to be able to do anything anymore in the game because the remaining 20k people are not all going to be glued to their keyboards mining coal and, you know, simultaneously farming rainers and all of the other, you know, just all of the raw mats required to just keep this game going at a core level. And I just said to myself, there's no way that the upkeep is going to be there. And I think, again, probably not remembering it correctly, but if I am, shortly after the bot nuke, there was a supply shortage of everything because with all of the little, you know, supplying bots out of the game, and I guess no real players really producing any significant amount of raw materials because there's only so many that one player can produce, things started to get a little shisty. Oh, that coal shot up in price, just any sort of commodity shot up in price, as it would if supply became suddenly scarce for, you know, just all of your basic needs. So at that time I said to myself, all right, the time is right, and I sold my account. I did try to recover my account or see if I could have recovered it as it existed at this time, but I wasn't successful because I know that when they first introduced name changes, I did a bunch of name changes and things like that. But after I sold my account, of course, I didn't know what the password was. I didn't know a sufficient number of the recovery answers and questions. So, you know, my limited memory, I just couldn't remember all the information necessary to get my old account back. But that would have been pretty interesting if I could have. That would have been a real time capsule and would have been just very interesting to see. Super nostalgic, which is just what this game represents to me. At least it's just the epitome of nostalgia. You know, when I look back on sort of, you know, my golden years in terms of video games, I do love to play League of Legends. Yes, it's frustrating, but it's a great competitive outlet, which I never had before for anything. And I didn't know that I could be a pretty competitive person until I really started playing that game. Yeah, I played Call of Duty and stuff, and, you know, you win the casual Call of Duty match, but, you know, I'm not good either at League of Legends necessarily. I'm a complete scrub lord, but it is a better competitive outlet that I didn't know I had a need for earlier on. And that, at the time, I heard that when big RuneScape names were leaving the game, that's what I heard that they were going over to. League of Legends, that is. And so I looked into it, and I tried it, and I ended up liking it. So I played it. It took me a long time to get to where I was even able to just kind of basically function within a match. But I got there, and it was damn difficult too, because it was a completely different game style. And this is back when League was relatively new. You know, this has got to be season 1, so newish game, and of course me being brand new to it, just totally different game style, difficult to pick up. But prior to, you know, me quitting RuneScape, there was some really fun shit that went down. You know, I had 2 other friends that played this game with me. There was a guy named Jason and a guy named Alan, and we kind of had a 3 Musketeers thing going where we would all play together, you know, when time permitted. And it was pretty fun, you know, because having at least, you know, 1 or 2 friends to play this game with makes a world of a difference. Because, if you're not some, boss soloing expert or something, having at least one buddy to team up with to do a boss really just makes it more accessible, easy, and fun. And that's what we did. We loved to do bosses. We did dungeoneering. We got our chaotic weapons together, things like that. Um, Myself and one of the two guys, we got a Pernix chest split at Nex. I think that's probably the most notable thing to, I guess, probably to ever happen to me while playing RuneScape was the Pernix chest split, because that was, I had never had been good with making money on this game for the most part. But when we got that was a 150 mil split across the small Nex team that, you know, took part in the kill that got us that. So that was a huge amount of money for me. And unfortunately, it couldn't have happened a little earlier in the old RuneScape career, because by that time, that's when things were starting to draw to a close, whether I knew it or not at the time. So having gotten that was really cool. That was something I remember very fondly. The Dagonoth Kings, though, overall, were my favorite boss, just bar none. I know every boss gets repetitive, but they had the most variety, within the boss. A lot of switching and things like that. It was, it was just fun. It was a fun boss to do. And I know that I never got a fire cape on my own. I had to have a friend, one of those guys, come over to my house and beat Jad for me to get the fire cape. I just couldn't get the prayer switches down. And I've made it to Jad twice on my own on this account, which is obviously not the hard part. It's beating him. And most people will probably say beating Jad is easy as pie. But I died both times when I did it. And I was a little upset because getting those prayer switches while fighting him is difficult. Especially for me, who I was never a master of prayer switching or flicking or anything like that. So hopefully one day I'll get a fire cape in this. That'd be a nice thing to do. Just a little milestone for myself. But outside of that, the content was there. The game was good. The game was mega good for a while. The addition of dungeoneering wasn't too bad. A lot of people said that they thought that was really bad. I didn't share that view. I thought it was a pretty good skill. A little bit odd, but it was one of those things where people were saying, can we really call it a skill? Isn't it more of a mini game? And it all just depends who you ask. So for me, it was definitely a positive thing, seeing just another new skill added. There were the Grandmaster quests while Guthix sleeps. What was the other one? There was Nomad's Requiem. What was the follow-up to While Guthix Sleeps? Can't remember. Yeah, I'm drawing a blank. But there were the ancient curses. There were, overloads. They had high level content. Most of the attention went to high level content, not mid level content. Because I suppose the game has to keep evolving in some way. But if you're always just making new BIS stuff, then you have the issue of power creep, which is an issue in any game, especially a game where you're trying to achieve longevity. I can't even imagine how difficult it gets when people are banging their fists on the table for new content, and you have to sit there and try to design something with power creep in mind, because you can't just keep making continually better and better stuff, or it'll break the game. That's what happened with this Twisted Bow on release. It was so good. You were hitting Dagonoth Prime for like 80s and shit, which is just not possible under normal circumstances. So that's got to be difficult. And I haven't tried, I think, almost any of like the new to OSRS content. Obviously, I'm holding an Abyssal Bludgeon, which is clearly a very new piece of content, but I haven't done the Slayer boss, and that's because I just don't have the Slayer level for it. I'm a ways off. That's a lot of experience to have to get. I think it's 85. Can't really check. Yeah, I couldn't get to it in time, but I think it's 85. Abyssal Demons, I remember as being 85. So that's, that's new. They came out with all these Slayer bosses and stuff. That's interesting. That's fun. That mixes it up because Slayer is normally just a huge grind. Not that that's necessarily too bad because you can make some money off of it, but it's a grind nonetheless. Agility. They did the rooftop courses. That's kind of interesting. They found a way to work. They called it graceful, or they call it graceful in OSRS, but I want to say it was called agile in RS2. I think that was what they called it. They called it agile, and I think you had to have a way higher agility level to get it, like way higher. You had to have like 85 just to get the chest piece, I think. And then I think you had to keep going up because you had to do those advanced courses to get the pieces. So they had a lot of expansive end game content, or I guess like late game maybe, because depending on who you ask, there is no end game. But they had the curses, they had overloads, significant stuff to cater to your high level players, but again, always sort of lacking in the mid range because I guess let's face it, no high level player gets amped for mid level gear. It's super cool for PKing and things like that, which is always fun to watch. But if you can't make use of it at the high end, then not as many people are going to be a fan of it. Also, if you do make better mid-level gear, it is still going to eventually get phased out by even some of the worse, I should say, high-level gear, because the high-level gear will just always have better stats or this or that or blah blah blah. So I always thought a little more attention, though, even with that being said, should have been paid to mid-game content, because part of getting new people into the game has to be giving them something to sink their teeth into. And I do remember one of the moves that it was a complete head scratcher, I think, for most people, was the decision to take damage from, I guess we'll call it base 10, if you will, because you're hitting in solid numbers, from 1 to whatever it is, like 70 or 80, whatever the max is. But then they just decided to tack a 0 on the end of it, and they cited the reason as being new players find it frustrating. I think they said something like new players find it frustrating to hit zeros all the time. And in an MMO where the gameplay is all about character development, that's just part of it. And the part where you just only hit zeros, it doesn't last that long. It doesn't last long enough to merit changing your game's like DPS system, if you will, to be hitting in terms of tens and hundreds instead of ones and tens. It made some fun looking PK videos, and you got to see a little bit more granular damage statistics. Instead of hitting the troll for a 33, maybe I hit it for a 33, 337 or whatever. But I remember hearing that a lot of people quit over that, and I don't know why I didn't, but a lot of people did quit over that. I think there were only a few points where there was sort of an exodus, and I think that was one of them. was the Constitution update. That's what they changed. They changed hit points to being called Constitution, which I thought was stupid as well. It just made no sense. Summoning was great. I know that I did have 96 summoning, so I had the Pack Yak. Or was that 92? It was one of those two. But I know that I had the Pack Yak and the Unicorn, which was, awesome. Obviously, 30 extra inventory spaces is crazy. You had things like the Bunyip. What were some other decent summoning familiars? The Tortoise and the Terror Bird, of course, for your low-level inventory summons and things like that. Yeah, I'm trying to think of anything else. I know that they had the... Yeah, they did have the Dragon Defender back at that time, too. They did. They did. Now I remember that. They did have that. I think they got around to it much more quickly this time, if I'm not mistaken, than they did in RS2. I guess I should say a word or two about the HD update and how I felt about that. I actually liked the HD update. I'm not sure if that's an unpopular opinion or not, but I actually liked it. Initially, when it first came out, I thought it looked like just dog shit. I thought it looked so silly. Because, it's just a huge deviation from what you're used to. And over time, I got used to it and started to like it, but there were a few things that suffered as a result of it. As an example, animations, certain animations. The biggest culprit, it'll always stick with me, is the whip, the Abyssal Whip. Before the HD update, it had that really clean, sort of whip animation where your character, brings it back and then, strikes with it. But after the HD update, it just became this, like, wet fucking noodle that your character just swung at things. And it didn't look like you were, hitting something with a whip or something. It just looked like you were using a thin pool noodle to, bop someone over the head with. And then it happened to hit 30s, which... I don't know, it just feels weird. From an animation perspective, it did not look good. It was not satisfying. That's one that I remember looking at the time and just thinking, I can't believe that this was, cleared, so to speak. Someone came along and said, yeah, that looks good. We'll put that in the update. Because for an item that you're supposed to be whipping someone with, the animation just did not fit the weapon, especially compared to what it was before. So that one was a real downgrade. They did the item sprite updates as well, although it was limited as far as I remember. I remember them taking the D-Skimmy and making it look shitty. But I'd have to go check like old patch notes to see what they changed it into. But I remember being very dissatisfied with both the visual update of the weapon and then the preceding that, the sprite update. I think the visual update for the D-Skimmy was within my time on the game. I want to say it was. But I know that I can say with certainty that I didn't play when RS3 came around. In fact, quitting at the end of 2012, I don't remember when the Warcraft update or whatever you'd want to call it for the game came out. But I do remember going back to the game years later and... Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. Who is my Slayer Master? Oh, right. Okay. I remember who it is. This is what happens when you don't play the game for a few months. I remember logging back in, or maybe not logging back in, no, because I didn't have an account, so I couldn't have done that. But looking up videos of RuneScape just because I was thinking to myself, oh, I wonder where the game is now. And seeing this just bizarre ass update for the game that just it was like a freaking cryptocurrency fork. It just was such a left turn compared to the direction of the game prior that it it was bizarre. It was very bizarre. So you would you RuneScape had, your right click, left click style combat, and of course, with the variation where you can do your, now people are crazy with the tick spec combos and things like that. But back in the day, you just had the tick based combat, and then years later, I came back to find that holy shit, they started some new thing where it's like World of Warcraft. You have these abilities and things. So that was just complete ass. And that's when I said to myself at the time, okay, it was a really good time to have gotten out of the game, because I would have never enjoyed playing that version of RuneScape and finding out that the way that they approached experience and all of that stuff, reading about that convinced me even more thoroughly of that. I think what I'll do is cut off for now. I think that's certainly enough rambling and ranting for one video. And then if I can think of another topic to talk about with respect to the game, I'll come back and just sort of share my thoughts on it. I guess that's really all I'm good for. I was never one of the the big guys, the big RuneScape big dogs. But I played it for years and years and years, and I really enjoyed it. So I think that'll do it for this one. I'm gonna go ahead and bank my stuff. I appreciate you watching. Take care.